Good morning, everybody. Dr. Nicola Ducharme here. As promised, today I am going to be talking to you about menopause and some of the things that can help if you're going through menopause and having symptoms. So we talked the other day about perimenopause and about estrogen dominance. So today we're going to be talking about actually going into the menopausal phase. So just to define this, perimenopause is considered the time leading up to menopause, like around menopause. So for a lot of women, that happens throughout their 40s, especially in the late 40s. And what happens there is that progesterone levels are gradually falling. Estrogen, not so much. Throughout the 40s in perimenopause, estrogen levels stay pretty decent. It's the progesterone that's getting lower and lower. And so then as a woman goes into menopause, the estrogen then drops, and it can drop fairly dramatically. So it can be a more sudden onset where women in their 40s are like, oh, I can't lose weight anymore. Oh, my periods are changing, or my cycles are getting shorter, or I'm getting more PMS. Once menopause hits, it's like it's a whole different kettle of fish, right? So then women are experiencing hot flashes and night sweats and dips in their libido, mood swings, inability to focus, again, weight gain. There's a whole host of things that can come with the menopausal phase, but most notably for a lot of women is the hot flashes and the night sweats. And that can be really debilitating and really problematic. So what are we going to do about this? Firstly, we want to do our assessment. So we want to do our lab work. As I've mentioned before, I'm actually fine doing hormone labs on blood work. So it can be done through any lab, LabCorp, Quest, any lab can do that. And what I look at are the markers estradiol, progesterone, yes, hair loss, thank you, absolutely hair loss. Estradiol, progesterone, and testosterone, both free testosterone and total testosterone, because that'll give us a little bit more specific information. And so we look at that on blood work. Now, you guys know me well enough by now to know that I'm huge on adrenal health. And as I've stated in the past, the adrenals are responsible for 35% of reproductive hormones leading up to menopause, and then up to 50% after that. So if your natural hormone production is dropping, especially the ovarian production, then you want to make sure your adrenals are firing on all four cylinders so that they can pick up more of that hormone production and you don't end up as deficient. Okay, so for assessment of adrenals, I do always go with a salivary cortisol test so we can see the pattern morning, noon, afternoon, and night. I've talked about that in a lot of other videos, and there will be some videos specific to adrenals. So if you want to learn more about that, you could just go search for those. But looking at adrenal health in any hormonal dysregulation is super important. So once we have those levels, we can see kind of what needs to be done. We have our baseline that we can then work from and recheck later on. Because whenever we do any kind of intervention that influences hormones, we do want to be like monitoring that and checking lab work periodically. It may be every 3 months in the beginning, maybe once a year, once everything's more settled, but we want to be accountable for the interventions that we're doing. So from a diet standpoint, one of the complaints, and valid complaints because it's true, of women in this age group is that they're gaining weight and they have an inability to lose weight, and it's usually abdominal fat. So it's like the big stomach that they never had in the past. And we do need to look at cortisol because that can influence that too. But most people will find that shifting to like a lower carb diet, certainly being very mindful about sugars, cutting out any refined sugars, really just trying to get a whole foods, natural, organic, no processed food diet is really going to be the best thing. One added bonus would be to make sure to get a lot of cruciferous vegetables, because cruciferous vegetables contain compounds that help in the regulation and metabolism of estrogen. Okay, so they just help the way that estrogen is utilized by the body, the way it's broken down by the body, shifting it into healthier metabolites and away from the more cancer-causing metabolites. So that would be one thing to make sure in the diet, that there's plenty of cruciferous vegetables. There are also some nutrients that can be helpful, like certainly making sure, standard B vitamins are covered. Magnesium certainly is an important one. Evening primrose oil can be a good essential fatty acid for hormone regulation. So there are some kind of nutrients that can help. But where I really go first as sort of my first level of intervention, so we do look at adrenals and do regulate adrenal function with adaptogenic herbs, which again, I've talked about it before. That's more like ashwagandha and rhodiola and holy basil, cordyceps, things of that nature. And then for menopausal women, if DHEA levels are low, then it's a good idea to supplement with DHEA as well. So DHEA is an adrenal hormone, but it can be converted either to estrogen or testosterone. So I mentioned that if a woman is estrogen dominant, then DHEA may not be as appropriate. But if a woman is deficient in estrogen and testosterone and their DHEA is low, then supplementing DHEA is a perfect thing to do. And again, we want that baseline lab so we can monitor and make sure we're dosing appropriately. So the adrenal stuff kind of comes first. And then in terms of herbs to help with menopausal symptoms, there are a lot. And sorry, just to pause here, I'm getting a question. What if DHEA is high? Well, then we want to look at where that's coming from in the pathway. If DHEA is high and estrogen and testosterone are low, then it may be more of an indicator to support the estrogen and testosterone specifically, not so much the up the pathway. So if DHEA is high, you certainly wouldn't supplement with that, obviously. But you may want to look at pregnenolone levels and see kind of where in that pathway the imbalance is coming from. So pregnenolone is like, sort of, we call it the grandmother hormone. Pregnenolone is one step up. So all these hormones come from cholesterol. Therefore, you need enough cholesterol in your diet to be able to create these hormones. Then it all goes from cholesterol to pregnenolone. And from pregnenolone to DHEA to estrogen and testosterone on one side of the pathway, and to cortisol and progesterone on the other side of the pathway. Okay, so somebody who's well qualified to read those things would be able to kind of see where the blocks are in the pathway or where things are getting a little, backed up. Another thing, if hormones are high, you also want to be very conscious of liver function because your liver is detoxifying all your hormones. So that's something to consider as well. So, all right, so we've done the assessment for adrenals. Now we're talking about herbs that actually work more on the female hormones, the reproductive hormones. So there are a lot of herbs that can help balance women's hormones and help support estrogen. Dong quai, black cohosh, red clover. Licorice root is a good one because licorice root is slightly estrogenic, meaning it helps to build estrogen, but it also helps to build cortisol. So licorice root is a go-to for me. If somebody has low cortisol and low estrogen, then licorice root is perfect for that. What else? Vitex, which helps the progesterone side of things as well. And then the other one that I like to use is maca. And maca it's an adaptogen as well. So it's a good sort of whole body tonic. It helps support estrogen. It does also help somewhat with the progesterone, but a lot of women feel sort of energized and just feel a bit more balanced with maca. And the one we carry is called Feminescence, and they really know their maca. They've got 3 different products using 3 different strains of maca for what is most appropriate to the stage of the life cycle. So they've got one for with younger women who are still having menstrual cycles, but maybe have like PMS type symptoms, things like that. They've got one for perimenopause, and then they've got one for menopause. So they're very honed in to this maca situation. And so Maca can be good for building estrogen and sort of for helping the adrenals. So what else did I say? Red clover, black cohosh, licorice root, vitex. St. John's wort is another one we use sometimes. And that can help when there's sort of mood imbalance as well, because St. John's wort is kind of serotonin producing or encouraging. The caution with St. John's wort is it's not a good idea to take it if you're taking a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So if you're taking an antidepressant medication or an anti-anxiety medication that works by increasing serotonin, then be cautious of St. John's wort because it can build serotonin too. And too much serotonin can lead to something called serotonin syndrome, which is not a good thing. So just be mindful of that. But you can find some really good herbal blends. I mean, we make one, a Restore Medicine one. Other brands that I like, Gaia makes very good herbal blends. Wise Woman Herbals makes really good blends. Really, they tailor to women and hormonal issues. What else? I love the Feminescence Marker, I think is the best, hands down. And then adrenal formulas, two favorites would be our Restore Adrenal Support Tincture, which is sort of based on adaptogens. And then there's another one called HPA Adapt by Integrative Therapeutics, or is it HPA Assist? I get the names mixed up. Anyway, I've just started using that one recently on recommendation of a colleague, and it's got really good amounts of the different herbs in there. And so I like that. It's a nice potent formula. If it doesn't come back to me by the end of the video, if you're interested in the actual name, not just my guess at the name, feel free to shoot me a message. So then let's talk about hormone support and hormone therapy. One thing I'm pretty clear about is that synthetic hormones are not the safest way to go. In fact, when they did that massive long-term study of hormone replacement therapy, they had to stop the study because they couldn't ethically go on with the increase in cancer that was happening in the women who were taking the actual synthetic estrogen. And so I could never, in good conscience, stand behind synthetic estrogen or testosterone or progesterone replacement therapy. That's just my bent. I know there's a lot of doctors out there and some people are doing pellets or patches or whatever and using synthetic estrogens. I also have a bit of an issue ethically with the treatment of the horses to produce that because synthetic estrogens do come from pregnant mares' urines. So they have it's a whole industry of keeping these horses pregnant to get their urine to make this estrogen. So not so happy with that. I'm a horse lover. So that, and again, that's just a personal opinion of mine. So where I think it gets really cool is bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And bioidentical, we don't call it natural because these things do not grow on trees, right? To be clear, they are created, they're synthesized in a lab. However, they are synthesized to match human hormone structure. Okay, so they're creating something that our bodies know what to do with. It's not a foreign substance. It may be introduced externally, but at least the body can take it and go, okay, we have the infrastructure for this. We know how to use it. We know how to detox it. We know how to clear it. We're good. Now, having said that, if I have a woman who has a history of breast cancer, say her mom and her sister died of breast cancer, then we may avoid bioidentical hormone therapy too. I'm not saying it's without risk, okay? I'm confident in saying there is less risk than the synthetic, but it still has to be, assessed on an individual basis. And so if somebody has that hormone or that estrogen receptor or family history, that vulnerability, then it's possibly not worth doing that. It's not worth trying that. However, generally speaking, bioidentical hormones, I have had very good results with them, and they tend to be quite well tolerated, and they can really turn things around from, I don't know who I am anymore, I'm just, everything's just changed so suddenly, to really feeling like yourself again and feeling kind of like back on track. So with these hormones, they come from a compounding pharmacy, so they do require a prescription, but the compounding pharmacy can make them in any ratio and any combination we ask for. So the one I use most frequently is called biased in the terms of estrogen. There are 3 different kinds of estrogen. So biased contains 2 kinds of estrogen. Triest contains all 3. But really estradiol makes up about 80% of your estrogens, and that's really the most active. So I've had good results with biased, and we dose according to what we saw in the lab work. So I'm going to call like maybe 2.5 milligrams of biased is sort of an average kind of dose. And generally speaking, with postmenopausal women who are not having periods anymore, I do like to do the cream because they can do it, safely and effectively every day. Taking hormones orally, like in a capsule form, you are going to lose some of the potency because it will digest through the gut. It'll go to the liver. Whereas if you do it topically, it will get absorbed into the bloodstream and you don't lose that sort of digestive element, or you don't have that digestive element, I should say. So I really like the creams. And what's really nice about the creams is that ultimately a compounding pharmacy can put them all together. So if we have a woman who needs estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, once we're pretty sure on our doses, they can roll that all into one cream. So it just makes it more straightforward. It makes it just less cumbersome, less cream that they have to, get to absorb on their skin. However, in the beginning, I always prescribe them separately because sometimes we have to tweak things a little bit, right? So if a woman starts taking testosterone and finds herself feeling really aggressive or notices any hair growth, then that's too high of a dose. And I'm always super conservative about testosterone, but just by way of example. So I usually start on a really little dose and then kind of go up gradually. But, if the 3 things are rolled in together and it turns out she's getting too much testosterone, then the whole thing has to be scrapped, right? Whereas if we have 3 separately, we can tweak the individual components, make sure we're on the right dose. Then once we're happy with everything, we roll it into a single cream. And it's more cost effective that way as well. But, in the beginning, it's good to really be able to hone in the doses of the individual components. Compounding pharmacies can also put DHEA in that cream. So if somebody's low in DHEA and that's indicated, that could go in there as well. So the other thing that I'm quite big on is not doing unopposed estrogen. And so there are some docs, especially if women have had a hysterectomy and they don't have a uterus, who are like, oh, you don't have a uterus, you don't need progesterone. And they give estrogen by itself. But please consider that progesterone is a whole body hormone, right? And unopposed estrogen is going to put you at higher risk for cancer. So we want to use progesterone to kind of balance out the estrogen and balance the effects of the estrogen on the body. So even if you have had a hysterectomy and don't have a uterus, the progesterone piece is still important. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. But I love the bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And like I said, we look at levels every 6 months. We want to monitor and make sure we're doing the right thing. But for me, I've seen women have a lot of benefit from that. I haven't really talked about thyroid here, but thyroid plays into the whole thing too. So, just having that on the radar of being assessed. And I did talk about adrenals. So all these hormone things go in together. The final thing I would say is just by way of lifestyle, just trying to, maintain some system of stress management. Sleep hygiene is important, like your patterns and habits around sleep, because sleep can be interrupted in menopause. That low estrogen, usually that corrects with the right hormones as well. But just being mindful of that, and so helping yourself as much as possible. A yoga practice, a meditation practice, all of those things will be good. But really, focusing on the whole foods diet, maybe getting into juicing some greens in the morning. The more you can do with your nutrition and your exercise and making sure you're getting out and walking every day, weight-bearing exercise as well, just from a bone health standpoint, is super important at this age. But yeah, just, trying to cover as many of those bases as possible. And then if you start some herbs to help balance your hormones and they don't do enough, then you can consider bioidentical hormones. Just quickly, I had a question here. How do these hormones affect the thyroid? So all the directions for the hormones come from the pituitary. And actually, even before that, they come from the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus talks to the pituitary talks to the thyroid, to the adrenal glands, to the ovaries, to the testes. So if some of the signals from upstream, meaning the pituitary, are getting a little off kilter, then that can affect the pituitary's communication with the thyroid as well. We also know that if adrenals are getting depleted, that impacts the thyroid, that holds the thyroid back. Okay, so if you have, and sometimes it's just the thyroid gets a bit wonky just all by itself as an unrelated thing. You know, as we get older, thyroid imbalance seems to be so common these days. So sometimes the thyroid's just getting a little bit jiggy too. But because the thyroid can play into fatigue and hair loss and depression and some of the things that overlap with reproductive hormones, you want to make sure you're aware of what you're addressing and just making sure that you're not focusing just on the female hormones and ignoring the thyroid, which, if it's not working correctly, could be affecting some of the same symptoms. I hope that makes sense. So there you go. There's your rundown on menopause. And I had also said I'll do another one about andropause, which is really what men go through, in their middle age, other than this red sports car deficiency that they seem to experience. So I will do another video. Maybe I'll do my next video on andropause. So if you are a man listening in, or if you are the partner or mother or daughter of somebody that is experiencing health changes, then yeah, listen in or share it with them, share the information. All right, folks, so have a great day. Thank you. And hi, if you're watching the replay, thank you for coming back. Any questions, reach out, and I'll see you again very soon.